I've cruised on European rivers 12 times and just back from a Rhine River cruise on Avalon Waterways. Once again, I met so many people who spoke about surprising and frustrating things they'd only encountered and realized once they were on the cruise, because none of the lines, reviews, or commentators seemed willing to talk about them frankly or even underplay them. Welcome aboard. I'm Gary Bembridge, and here's what you need to know about European river cruising to avoid any disappointments and also to make sure that a river cruise is right for you. First off, many are surprised when they find river cruises are not as scenic as the brochures and ads suggest. There is an impression that European river cruising is a constant flow of stunning, postcard-perfect scenery all the time. However, while there is a lot, it's not constantly magnificent as many expect. The good news is that the riverbanks are always close by, so you can see what's on them. But as a comment left by Randy L on a social media post I did during that recent Rhine River cruise, she said this about her experience. We found it very industrial, a lot of ugly campgrounds and not very scenic except for one day where the castles were. Of course, there are, as she said, some beautiful stretches, like when we also sailed through that UNESCO World Heritage Rhine Gorge that Randy mentioned, with around 40 castles dotted on rolling hills and quaint towns. Also, on other cruises I've done where we sailed through things like the UNESCO World Heritage Wachu Valley on the Danube, past castles, Melk Abbey, and picturesque towns. However, on many stretches of the rivers, there are factories, other industrial complexes, lots of barges carrying containers, fuel, raw materials, and other supplies. Also, as Randy mentioned, you'll often see campsites dotted along the way. You're also going to be passing through many locks. Personally, while locks are not particularly scenic, I find them absolutely fascinating. Although while most of the passengers actually came out to see and experience the first lock we went through, for the other 11 on my cruise, hardly anyone joined me for those. River cruising means being prepared for the constant scenery to be a mixture of sights, not just what the ads all show. I think what adds to the image of river cruising, though, being so scenic, is that the lines make much of the fact that river cruise ships dock in the heart of the cities and the towns. However, once on a trip, you'll find that while that is often true, it's not every time. For example, across the 7 nights, my Rhine River cruise did dock in the heart of Amsterdam, Cologne, Rudolph and Mainz. On the 3 other days, we docked in more remote places with little around other than some industrial buildings like in Bresac, because that's the closest spot to get to the beautiful Freiburg, half an hour away, and also then to the Black Forest, which was an hour and a half away from there. Another day we docked at Kehl, an industrial area that is convenient to get to Strasbourg. While you're often going to dock in the heart of places with the town, sites and things to do are close by. Don't assume that every stop will be, so check the detail of any itinerary carefully. And thinking ahead is also key to avoid the next issue that many people encounter. Without good planning, many quickly find that the ports can get a little bit repetitive rather fast. One of the biggest surprises I see first-time river cruisers experience is how quickly they find the towns all start to feel similar and blur into one another. Visiting them can become repetitive. This is especially true on the Rhine, where cities like Cologne, Rudolph, Mainz, Strasbourg, and Freiburg that I visited all have beautiful, quaint old town areas. They have cobbled streets. They always have a big cathedral. They have town squares. They have farmers' markets. But they all start to feel and look similar. Now, whilst they're absolutely picturesque, they can become interchangeable, and it's kind of hard to remember which was which. That's why when I go on river cruises, I try to mix up the cruise with different types of excursions. So while I did some town walking tours in Strasbourg, Cologne, Freiburg, in Mainz I actually went on a tour to the Gutenberg Museum to learn about his invention of printing presses and to see the original Bibles that he printed. In Rudolph, instead of going on the town walking tour, I went on the cable car over the vineyards to the impressive Niederwald monument. I signed up to do a cycling tour in another port to get a different experience too. Another thing to bear in mind is I found that once you've done a particular river, be it the Rhine, the Danube, the Loire, the Seine, and so on, if you go again, it can be rather repetitive. Why is that? Well, because if you look at the itineraries, all river cruises on a particular river usually stop at all of the same places and do all of the same tours because there is actually a limit to the places and must-see sites along the way. So I recommend, if you have been on one river, to always go on another, or if you're repeating a river, consider a themed cruise such as a Christmas market cruise, which will have a very different focus in all of the stops. I also recommend you try and match a river much more closely to your interests. Let me give you some examples. If you're interested in chateaus and wine, go on the Loire. If you're into history, particularly German history, go on the Rhine. If you perhaps prefer bigger cities, you want to visit iconic capitals like Vienna, Budapest, Bratislava, and even Belgrade in one trip, go on the Danube. Or perhaps you go on the Seine to see a lot of Paris, French countryside, and visit the Normandy landing sites. The next thing that most people need to be warned about is one where, while many know is a risk, they don't know what happens if it affects their cruise, and that is water levels. Most people these days know that European river cruises can be disrupted by too high water, where it becomes impossible for the ships to sail under some bridges, and too low water for the ships to actually physically sail along the river. Now, on my latest Rhine cruise, the water levels were low, but still they were enough for us to sail. But those on the Mosel River, those cruises couldn't operate fully. The water was too low. I've been on several river cruises on the Danube, the Loire, and Po rivers near Venice that have all been disrupted by low water levels. The impact was different based on the level, but you should expect some or all of the following that I've experienced due to water levels. If the ship cannot reach the scheduled embarkation and disembarkation ports, they may change even at short notice. Mine once changed literally the day before joining an Avalon Waterways Danube cruise, which also had to terminate in Vienna, not in Budapest, due to water levels. On both a Uniworld Venice Po River cruise and across Europe Loire cruise, the ships could only move between a few planned stops, and so we stayed moored in one place and would bus the extra distance to do planned excursions, adding an hour to an hour and a half there and back for those excursions. What has not happened to me yet, but has to several friends, is they've changed ships during the cruise itself. They sailed part of their cruise on one ship to the point that it couldn't go any further. They were then packed up and they were moved by bus to another ship further down the river where the water again was deep enough to sail that stretch. It's impossible to know far ahead when water levels will be low or high because it all depends on the weather. So knowing what could happen is really important. Another area I found that some people don't appreciate, especially those who've been on ocean cruising, is how laid back, low-key, informal, and limited options there are on a river cruise. Now, the ships range from 100 to 200 passengers. The Avalon Envision, for example, that I was on carried 166 with 47 crew. It makes for a very relaxed setup because there's never any lines, there's fast and flexible embarkation, disembarkation. There's not a big range of venues on board though. For example, on that ship, which is typical, there was just one large lounge with a bar, a smaller lounge at the rear with scenic viewing, one dining room offering buffet breakfast, buffet lunch, and a 4-course served dinner, a very small fitness center, and then a top deck with a hot tub and seating which stretched across the whole ship. That is it. The daily program of activities was light, with at most in the evenings for entertainment, a visiting local band or some musicians, some games, or a guest speaker. Many lines have a pianist to play before and after dinner, but often things wind down pretty early. Most lines have no dress code, so that also makes it feel very informal too. Those people who like or are used to the choice and flexibility of bars, lounges, entertainment venues like casinos, spas, a range of dining options, they will find river cruising very different because it has none of that. River cruising is way less about the ship and more about the destination and the off-ship experience of the region itself. Although there is one aspect of onboard life that some find a big plus and others found a big downside. But before I address that, I quickly want to talk about how I personally remember all my cruises, including this recent Rhine River cruise. And that's by getting a customized map showing exactly where my cruise went from the Cruise Maps. This is a company founded by two friends of mine, naval architect Will and geographer Matt. Made to order using AIS satellite ship tracking data, it shows where, and in this case, exactly where my Avalon River cruise actually went. The cruise maps offers them as framed maps to hang on the wall, or as I did for this one, an A4 map to collect with other cruises I've done in my cruise maps album. They just need the date, name of the river cruise ship, and start and end points to make the customized river cruise map. To find out more and get 10% off any order, visit thecruisemaps.com/TFT. That's thecruisemaps.com/TFT. Now, back to that onboard river cruise line issue. And this is that socializing is a big part and feature of river cruising. With up to only 200 guests, and usually much fewer, you get to recognize, interact with, and get to know fellow travelers really, really quickly. It's a small ship, and you're going to see them at meals, share tables with them, be on the excursions with them, join and sit with them in the lounge for the happy hour and next day briefing, perhaps hang out with them on the top deck during scenic sailings, and so on. It's a very social environment. If you are a gregarious, outgoing person and like to meet people, you are likely to absolutely love it. However, if you're introvert or want to be more anonymous, alone, and be under the radar, you're going to find that much more challenging on a river cruise. Also, it's important to understand that the main demographic on river cruises does tend to be a little bit older, 60s, 70s and above. Cruise lines are trying to attract more younger, more families, more multi-generational, but that demographic are still the vast majority on sailings. Something I still see people thrown by is that river cruise ships dock side by side, sometimes 3 deep and very close. You don't normally see this in any of the advertising or promotional material. This has some big implications. First, if you've booked a cabin with a balcony or big scenic windows like I'd done, often when you're docked, you're going to be looking slap bang just a few feet away into a cabin or the side of a ship opposite you. Second, you may have to pass over or through a ship docked next to you to actually physically get to the shore side. On my most recent trip in one port, I had to go up the stairs on my ship to the top deck, walk across the deck of the neighboring ship, and then down their stairs to get to the shore and head out on excursions. In another, I was actually able to just get up and walk through the reception area of the neighboring ship to get to and from my ship. This, of course, had some challenges for less mobile travelers. In fact, I see many people overestimate river cruising suitability for people with mobility and accessibility needs. As well as this issue, many river ports have steep gangways, the towns have cobbled streets, not all the lines have elevators between the decks, few have accessible cabins, and the tours all tend to be walking ones. I also see many people considering river cruising shocked and surprised at just how much it costs. While most river cruise lines have inclusions in the fare, for example, my Avalon fare, of course, included cabin and dining, but also included a choice from at least 2 excursions at every port, drinks with lunch, dinner, and during happy hour, Starlink Wi-Fi for multiple devices. The fare itself was really high, especially if you compare it to ocean cruising fares, where I could have gone for the same price on a luxury or ultra-luxury ocean line like Oceania, Silversea, Seabourn, Explorer Journeys for the same price. Avalon is a premium line, so it falls between the 5-star luxury river lines like Riverside, Uniworld and Scenic, and the 3-star sort of value lines across Europe, TUI, Grand Circle, and so on. And it's definitely comparable to other 4-star premium lines like Viking, Emerald, and Waterways. A deluxe cabin on the lowest deck, which is 3/4 beneath the waterline, costs per cabin for 2 people from $1,000 a night. A panorama suite, the main type of cabin, which is on deck 2 and 3 with wall-to-wall windows, is from $1,600 a night, while a royal suite is around $2,100 a night for a cabin for 2. River cruising is pretty expensive. Particularly then I had to add the cost of getting there, transfers and gratuities to that fare. I've compared river versus ocean cruising a few times, and because many people wonder what a river cruise does better and worse than ocean cruising, I talk about it over in this video. So join me over there and find out what those things are. See you over there.